Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Shaman Talk. My guest today is Don Miguel Ruiz Jr, who's a Toltec Master and author of the new book, The Poisoned Arrow, a Toltec Guide to Overcoming Fear. Now, the book opens with a powerful Buddhist parable, and I'm going to give you it now so you can think about it as we talk about this book. Imagine you're struck by a poisoned arrow and your friends rush to help, but you stop them. Wait, before you remove it, I need to know who shot me. Where are they from? Why did they do it? And when I read the book, this made me laugh because I was like, I absolutely recognize that reaction. But what I love about this book is that Miguel adds something really crucial. So even after we remove the arrow, there's poison left behind, and the poison is fear. And he spent his life studying how psychological fear infiltrates every aspect of our lives, our relationships, our choices, our dreams. And in the poison arrow, he offers us the antidote to that poison. So today, we get to explore that, the practices and how ancient Toltec wisdom meets our modern fears. So Miguel, thank you so much. It's an honor to have you.
Hi, Rhonda. Good morning, afternoon. It's an honor to be on your podcast. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah. Okay. So you've written many beautiful books about attachment, self-mastery, relationships. What was it about fear that was calling to be explored now? What made 2025 the right time for the poisoned arrow?
Well, that's a very wonderful question. Thank you. It came out of basically a combination of situations. Obviously, 2020 and everything that happened post and election times and everything that's happening with social media and things like that. But that was like at the time. The true nature is like the way I write books is that, for example, when I wrote my book, The 5 Levels of Attachment. I was writing about going up the levels of attachment, going from level 1 to level 5, from the authentic self to fanaticism. And then I started writing, going down and going between level 3 and level 2, from internalization to preference. I just started going off on a tangent and I just started writing because to me, that was the chapter or the section that I was like super interested in at the time. But my publisher said, well, that's breaking the timeline. It's when you write a book, you have to have this little line. Like I write actually because my profession before I was an author, I worked in the film industry and I went to film school. So for me, when I edit, I still see things as a line and you put things along it. So there's a rhythm that you follow in order for the story to flow. I still have that. So when he says, well, we're breaking the rhythm, I totally understood what he talks about. So sometimes you have to let go of your baby and finish the thing. So I hit select that area, copy, and I pasted it in a different section. And we continued and we finished the 5 levels of attachment. This little extra, I continue working on it, and it became the book, The Mastery of Self.
Wow.
And at that point, that's how the book's coming, because you write all this stuff and they become tangents. So at this point, Randy started to see this is how we get the ideas here. It's like, so we basically began, he had on his side all these extras that I had from 6 books prior. And he reached me one day and he says, Miguel, because of the times that we're doing, the fear really is a thing that we really need to work on. And I said, yeah, actually, I totally agree with that. I think that he says, I've already collected your extras from the books, and we have about 6 chapters here. I think we just have to keep going and fill this in. I'm like, yes, okay, let's do it. So that was at the beginning of 2023, or at the very end of 22. And at the beginning of writing it, it became this, I knew it conceptually, I knew it intellectually. I can finish the book that way, but then life has its ways. I suffered a concussion. I went through some life experiences, cancer scare, my son with his autism, getting diagnosed with something called caregiver's fatigue because my son is autistic, and taking care of him is like I was averaging like 3 hours of sleep a night. If I was lucky, I would get 4 or 5. So, and then the escalations and all that, and then I have my daughter as well, and my family and things that are happening in the world. but mostly it was what within me. So this book changed as from the beginning because my due date was September of 23, but I blew past my due date because I was recovering from a concussion from an old injury. And then once my son went away to a school, I had to deal with some stuff that's had been done, like the cancer scare, for example, relearning how to read because of the concussion, the way it happened. I had to work my brain and help it heal by being active and relearning how to write and relearning how to read. One reason why I expanded it. Randy and all the editors at Hierophant Publishing helped me quite a bit. It was nice, but it became this book of I went through something and now I'm sharing it. So that was that was the origins of the book. It's just the times that we were living in mixed in with what I was experiencing during the writing of this book.
Yeah, I find that often, as an author, the books that appear from me are very much related to the struggles that we have as people. And I think you brushed on that slightly in the book, right? Because you say, I really love the moment in the book where you share that you're a huge football fan and that people are very surprised that you would like football. So
Yes.
there's this like expectation that people put on spiritual teachers, and I'm interested how you handle that actually, and what and how fear might come up in that, and how writing this book might have helped you to support yourself through things like, I mean, it's a lot to carry, isn't it, when you have the weight of the eyes of the world on you?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because I made that conscious choice to bring in sports in our everyday life like that, things that people wouldn't consider spiritual. From my very first book, The Five Laws of Attachment, I used football, what in the States they call soccer, where the rest of us in the world call football or calcio in Italy. I use that as the example to describe how we can increase our levels of attachment. And to be honest with you, it was a bit of a challenge to the spiritual base that our readers and followers do. Uh, People who follow the family on with the books and the teachings and things like that. And it was a challenge to them to be able to find spirituality in everything because you can find spirituality in all these things because it's still a human experience. For example, Jose, my brother, Jose, he uses this image of going to an Ozzy Osbourne concert, may he rest in peace. And my brother had just come back from India and he was used to the chants and the prayers of being in India. So he went to an Ozzy Osbourne concert and they started singing, Mama, Mama, I'm coming home, I'm
Oh,
coming. And here's about several thousand metalheads, maybe a good 50 to 20,000 metalheads, all singing the lines to Mama, I'm coming home. And Jose stops and hears them, and he's going, they're oming. They're all oming. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful experience. So it's one of those things that in our family, we find spirituality in everything. In the book, we talk about me and my father going to an American football game. A game at the time was in San Diego, back when the San Diego Chargers used to exist. And then we went to see the same again with the Las Vegas Raiders, Oakland Raiders, LA Raiders. My father would look up because my father is an avid sports fan, just like us. We all grew up with sports. We enjoy watching events like that. But sometimes we can't help but see spirituality in anything. It's one of those things. It's the human expression. In other words, just spirituality is just the communion of humanity with the divinity. Yeah, and all that sense, and it's expressed in so many ways. Just look at the diversity in religions that the humanity has. At the core of every one of those religions, there's a moment of communion with divinity, and they do the very best to put it in their words that they can understand in the environment they're coming from. From that point of view, it's just the ability to engage. So we're watching the game, and my father looks up and he starts paying attention to the stadium and watches the crowd. If you've ever been to a game, any match on game day, you have half the stadium chanting and celebrating a goal, and the small little corner where you're booing, and then the visitors score, and this little section cheers while the rest of the jeers and boos and all that kind of thing. And my father says, this reminds me of the human brain, the mind. This is the mitote. So the way we describe it is like, imagine yourself in the center of the pitch, and you're in a sellout stadium like Wembley, for example, or La Maracana, or a big stadium like that, like here's Ann Arbor in Michigan, and the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. Like these are the stadiums that can sit 100,000 people. Imagine the stadiums filled with people, and each person that's screaming is every single one of your beliefs, every single one of your ideas, and each one of them wants to hook your attention. And that's the mitote. Basically, every single one of your beliefs tries to hook your attention. And the question is, which one are you attracted to? Are you attracted to those jeers that's putting you down for the good things you've done, or the part to celebrate you? Or in other case, you're listening to the jeers that reinforce your domestication or conditioning. Or are you listening to that big stadium? Or is it reverse? The whole stadium is jeering, and you only have this sliver of a group supporting your beliefs without cheering. Who are you giving your attention to? Now,
Mm.
we say this because, going back to your question, is about the fear about being authentic. Is that I do understand where that question comes from, because when the introduction of social media was first started, and we would share our social, and back then we were just being personal. We were not as it's like reserved as we are nowadays.
Yeah.
Jose shares, but back then, we just shared with everyone. And one of the biggest judgments we had, my brother and I, is when we put our music up. Well, I like I was saying before the conversation, I listen. I love the Depeche Mode, the Cure, the Smiths. I love wearing black. Um, I was a goth kid growing up. I also listened to heavy metal, Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden and things like that. And we also love our cumbias, of course, and hip hop and gangster rap and all things. So we would put up music, and people would judge us like, you should be listening to drum circles. You should be listening to spiritual music. You should not be listening to. You should be spiritual people. Like, for example, I once got judged for celebrating Halloween. Like, what kind of Toltecs? Do the Toltecs even know that, right, they're celebrating Halloween? And listening to that judgment, I'm going, they're projecting onto us. I remember Jose posting a video with his friend, and the friend is playing guitar, and Jose is singing, just a little patience. Yeah, I've been walking the streets at night, just trying to get it right. And he's singing his heart out, and people are judging, like, oh, you should not be, you're a Toltec, you're a spiritual teacher. So for us, that was kind of weird, but it was one of those things that, it was in the reality of that judgment. So to be to go beyond the fear of allowing someone's judgment to domesticate us and condition us to fit whatever image they have of us, it's the same thing as being at home with our friends and family. It's the thing about, who am I and how am I going to get expressed? There's the part of sides where you want to be able to engage and at the same time be authentic. And it's an authenticity where you find our real true journey in life. When Jose and I talk, we talk about our lives. We talk about what we've experienced. We talk about this. We don't talk about something that's so esoteric that is unreachable to so many people. It's like, for me, in my case, I prefer to share something that is some people consider mundane and bring you back to earth. Keep your foot on the ground and let your imagination soar at the same time. But it's one of those things that in life, that's going to happen. It's going to happen whether it's on social media or it's going to be in our personal lives. Who am I? So the being brave in not allowing domestication judge you, but at the same time find that common balance, find that common ground, of course. no one can make you feel inferior. That's one of my favorite quotes from Eleanor Roosevelt.
Mm.
No one can make you feel inferior without your consent.
Mm-hmm.
If I can paraphrase that, no one can make me feel inferior without my consent. How do I give consent? By believing it, by believing their judgments, because all they're doing is just sharing with us their own domestication, their own prejudice, or their own judgments, their own biases, their own book of law, their own mitote, that stadium that we talked about before, and sharing with us what they give their attention to. And having that compassion for us, of course, we will listen. My father always taught us, don't believe me, but learn to listen. Somewhere in what I say lies the truth. And if you understand
Mm.
that one, don't believe yourself, but learn to
Yeah.
listen. Somewhere what you're saying lies the truth. And you understand that one, don't believe anyone, but learn to listen. Somewhere in what they say lies the truth. Learn to listen, because sometimes in those expressions, there might be a truth that, like, you know what? I can see that. I'm going to shift something, but not as a form of a judgment, but because you actually listen. Most of the time, we're just letting things go because it doesn't really serve us and it's not really the truth. And it's basically their image of us. And there's nothing I can do to control that. Even if I try to speak it or share it, there's nothing I can do. And that's where the fear gets alleviated. It's one of those things that I can only control to the tips of my fingers, but I will be conscientious of it. Like one of the teachings I have here, it's like, there are words that are innocent here in the States that are not so innocent over where you're from. There's
Yeah.
words that I can use that here in the States I won't insult anyone because it's an innocent term, but it's not so innocent over there. In Scotland and England and Ireland over there, and I recently found out in Canada as well, and certain parts where the English and the Britons have been to. For example, the word fanny pack.
Yes.
It's an innocent term, but over there it's like
Oh, whoa, dude.
exactly. So it's I control. I'm I'm responsible for the integrity and clarity of what I say. I'm not responsible for how you hear it.
Yes.
And the reason why is because I don't control your perception. I don't control your world. If you grew up in that part of the world where that expression, that word means something different than mine, there's the only way we can find a common ground is the ability to listen to one another. And there's the point. Like, are we afraid to listen? Because the way I found out about that is that the individual from Wales, heard me say that particular word. Now I'm gonna be conscientious about it. Like, I know it might have some words or stinging meaning, so I'm not gonna edit myself, but I will be conscientious about it. And that's the balance. But she was able to ask me and give me the benefit of doubt, and she asked me, "What does that word mean to you?" And I explained myself what the F word meant, and she says, "Well, if you ever find yourself in the United Kingdom, that means something completely different." Then she told me that. It's like she could have made the assumption that I meant that word the way she grew up meaning it. And she could spend the rest of the workshop thinking I was this sexist, disrespectful to women who my grandmother should know how I'm talking, and does she or grandmother know about this type of word? But she didn't. She gave me the benefit of doubt and she asked.
Graceful.
Sometimes,
She gave grace, I guess.
excuse me, sorry?
Grace. She was graceful.
Yeah, she was graceful. Yes, I do believe that. I agree with
Yeah.
that. I concur. Yeah, she gave me the benefit of the doubt. And in asking, and she heard what I had to say, and then listening to what she says, we both had this understanding going, and we laughed about it. In fact, she started laughing before I did, because she was in on the joke before I understood. I understood what that meant.
Okay.
And since then, I've shared this story with so many people that in America, in the States, people have shared with me other words by which they found out. It's like, sorry, I'll tell us this one. I
Okay, right.
apologize to any of your audience people, but one of the
Oh, no,
people
it's
who
fine.
told me that is like her fiance, now husband, is from Scotland, and she went there, and the way she found out what that word meant is like they threw a party, and they had a big bonfire, a good fire pit going, and it was a cold night, and she decides to tell everyone, "Well, I'm gonna go up and warm my over by the fire," and everyone laughed. Everyone laughed. But to her, she said she means the gluteus maximus. That's what Fanny. Sorry,
Yeah.
I said it means
Yeah.
in the States. It's she's like my friend from Wales says. We call that a bum pack
It's a
because
bum
that's your
bag.
bum. Yeah,
Yeah.
that word means it's your bum, and that's what it means. You're trying to say, at least, actually. That's what you're trying to
Uh,
say, Miguel. Bum
that's
pack.
that's a really good story, isn't it? That's so good. So when people
Yeah, but
are
sorry.
yeah, no, you go
No,
ahead.
no, go for it. Go for it.
Okay, okay.
No, go
I
for
was
it.
going to say when you're talking about authenticity and fear and not allowing others' judgments to affect you, if someone's just starting out with this work and working with fear, do you have like some basic steps they can take?
Well, yeah. Well, basically, it's like in the book, the thing that really came up is understanding the difference between real fear and irrational fear.
Mm-hmm.
Real fear is when you have a physical threat against you in the body, the mind. Is like you are being threatened with a knife, you're being threatened with a gun or a fist, or you're being threatened with by a snake or a wild animal, or a situation where you're going to go bankrupt and you're going to lose all these things, or your career is about to end. These are real threats that the body will respond with fight, flee, or freeze. And it's real. And here's the thing, it's natural. There's nothing wrong with fear. Fear is easier to understand as a function rather than a concept. The function of fear is to keep you alive, to protect you. That's it. That's the job of fear. It's meant that when you're in those situations, you will respond with fight, flee, or freeze, or finish, or fawn, whichever way you want to describe that fourth one. But the body will secrete a hormone that allows you to survive. If it's fight, you're going to get a rush of adrenaline that all of a sudden you won't feel any pain during that time because there's so much adrenaline going that it's just it allows you to survive, or at least not feel the pain. If you have Flea, you're gonna run faster than Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner and Speedy Gonzales. If you know any of the Looney Tunes
Yeah.
cartoons from the United States, these are very fast characters. You will run faster than you ever think. Kind of like the fight, the whole expression here in the States called Mama Bear. It's like all of a sudden a fridge falls and there's a child underneath, and the mother's gonna have a strength that I didn't know she had, and she pushes the fridge out of the way because all of a sudden she didn't let that doubt get in the way of saving your child. That's what they call mama bear in that situation. Fight response. Freeze is when you have the deer in headlights. All of a sudden you can't move. For the first time, I experienced being in front of a rattlesnake without a glass wall in between us. The first time it was right in front of me, I froze with freeze. I just couldn't move. I was just petrified. And fawn is just letting something happen. Hopefully you'll survive and just let it happen. All of these are meant for you to keep alive. And it's good. It's natural. It's okay to have fear. It's okay. Irrational fear is slightly different. The image Now, when I wrote the book, me and Randy and our publisher and our editors, basically we already described it. So the story I'm about to tell you was redundant, so it didn't make the final cut, but I liked
Okay.
it. So I'll tell it. My favorite way to describe irrational fear is going to a movie theater. In the movie theater, you're gonna watch a horror movie. Any movie that really, for me when I was young, it was Poltergeist and The Exorcist. And the last movie that really made me feel fear was the Blair Witch Project the first time I saw it. The second time it wasn't so scary, but the first time I saw it, I was scared for a whole week. And the TV series Walking Dead also, but not because of the zombies, it was something else. It shows a different type of fear. But here's the thing. It's just light being projected onto the screen with a great sound system. You're not in danger. You're not in any threat. But as you get into the story and into the movie, all of a sudden you can't tell. You're in it. You're in the story. And in those scary moments when that scene comes in that's meant to really frighten you, you will respond with fight, flee, or freeze. The fight response is when we scream. We scream at the movie theater. That's the fight response. It's kind of like in the movie Braveheart, when everyone is chanting and screaming. Wallace is trying to make everyone get in, and everyone's screaming. That's basically trying to get the adrenaline going. So when you're screaming in a movie theater, it's basically the adrenaline getting ready to fight in their own way. Freeze is when you can't move, like you can't breathe, like the popcorn fell, but you can't move, you can't see, you can't the movie, it's just going the cinema. Flee is you can't go to the left, you can't go to the right. There's people, so you put your fingers in your ear, you close your eyes, and you start humming, trying to drown out the sound. You're trying to escape. And finish is just you just go numb. You just like let it happen. Just let it happen. The body is not in any real danger, but the emotions are real because we're experiencing the emotion. Sometimes our emotions are real. What triggered it may not be real. It's just light being projected onto a screen with a great sound system. Now, here's the thing. The mind is more powerful than any movie projector. The mind will project onto the world all the what ifs and answer it with the worst case scenario. That's my wife. My wife has that expression. She says, anxiety is answering all the what ifs with a worst case scenario. I don't know if she read it somewhere or it's hers, but she says it. It's my wife's. Anxiety is answering the worst case scenario, the what ifs with the worst case scenario. That's what irrational fear is. The projection onto the world and thinking the worst of it, and we will react with fear. So at this moment, we're basically abusing fear in the same way we abuse alcohol or drugs.
Mm.
We're just in like a scorpion. This is Jose's metaphor. Imagine a scorpion that stings itself over and over again, administering to itself that poison to itself again and again and again. To let go is the moment the scorpion decides to no longer sting itself, to no longer hurt itself with that poison. Irrational fear is the same way. We administer to ourselves the fear, that poison that we meant for someone else to ourselves, and it will only stop until we no longer abuse it. When we no longer judge ourselves. So that's different from PTSD, mind you. PTSD, the body remembers. You've gone through an experience, you've gone through a traumatic event that the nervous system remembers, the body remembers. And you may be doing all the work, you do all the process, your rational mind understands what's happening. That's if you already crossed the most difficult barrier, is acknowledging it, recognizing it. I have PTSD. That's usually the toughest part. Because otherwise we won't be able to heal that which we don't recognize or are aware of. But once you're aware of, you become aware that PTSD is this thing that it might be a sound, it might be the tone of voice, it might be a smell, a scent, a song, a bang, and the body remembers and it goes, and it will respond with that. That's different from irrational fear. That's an emotional wound that's going to take some time to heal. So knowing the difference between real fear and irrational fear and PTSD, to go beyond fear is to respect fear once again, to respect it in our lives once, to no longer abuse it, to no longer tap into our irrational fear, and knowing that it's just us making an assumption about the rest of the world, kind of like with the previous story, like the young lady from Wales thinking that I meant something else other than bum pack. We make assumptions of the world and we fill it up with the worst case scenario, and we're feeding ourselves that anxiety. versus real fear.
Yeah.
To respect fear is to know how it functions. Now, going back to your question about someone who is starting, it's a combination of both. We're quite aware of what could be wrong. That's what life experience is. Well, most of the time, the answer is the anxiety that comes with it. It's just that we're projecting onto life all the what ifs and letting it dictate our choices. So there's a combination of both. And one has to always be cautious. But it's not in not being cautious, it's more about being aware of the possibilities versus anxiety already answering it and reacting to it.
Mm.
Because that's the thing about anxiety. We will react to it as if it's already happening and it's not happening. To be aware of the potential that it could happen is basically, all right, my mind will think of this possibility. If the outcome outweighs, if the benefit outweighs that, like they say back in the 70s here in the States, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yeah.
My friend Kirk taught me that one. It's the juice worth the squeeze, which to me simply translates as it's the consequence worth the effort. And that only an individual can answer that because it's their life, it's their experience, it's their own journey. And the only way to know if the benefit outweighs the consequence or is the juice worth the squeeze is to know your own life, your own experience. So from that point of view, my grandmother, you can say, is she is the spiritual head of our family. Even though she passed away in 2008, she continues to be the spiritual head of this family. And it was her desire to share the tradition with everyone. When people say that I am walking in my father's footsteps, I have to say, yeah, I understand what you mean by that, but both my father and I are actually following my grandmother's dream. In other words, her footsteps. She's the one who decided to share the tradition outside the family, to go against the taboo that kept my abuelito, my great grandfather Don Leonardo, and my great 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 grandfather Don Ezequiel, my grandmother's father and my grandmother's grandfather. They grew up in a time in Mexico where it was taboo to talk anything outside the Catholic Church in Mexico, to teach anything of the Mesoamerican roots, because the shadow of the whole Inquisition was still prevalent in the area. So even though the whole Inquisition no longer had power at the time, in fact, the whole Inquisition closed its doors during my lifetime. I remember the day when I read that the Vatican had closed finally officially the Inquisition. But in Mexico, Don Leonardo and Ezequiel lived through the shadow of it, and it was taboo to teach anything outside the Catholic Church and teach the ancestral traditions. Even though in Mexico Catholicism is mixed with the Mesoamerican traditions. There's a lot of saints that used to have Nahuatl names. La Virgen de Guadalupe, her real name is Tonantzin Coatlicue,
Okay.
the mother goddess. And the Basilica of Guadalupe is built on top of Tonantzin's temple. So it's one of those things that Mexico is just the religions are pretty much fused. You're basically practicing both in certain aspects.
Similar to Scotland, actually. It's similar in Scotland.
Yeah. Yes, well, it's something that happens, right, throughout the world. But
yeah, it's almost like they
thing
have to merge to survive, right?
and that's what our ancestors did in order to survive.
Yeah.
We're able to teach this because the traditions merged. That's in Mexico. It's not famous. It's if you have to look for it. But there was a council of what priests, an Aztec priest, that came together and found a way to merge. And unbeknownst to the Catholic priests, a lot of the stuff that got sneaked in was the old Aztec traditions, and a lot of people continued to practice the tradition and just under a different name. And one of them is about to come up, the Day of the Dead, which is, it's controversial because it started in Spain, no, it started in Mexico. It's our fusion, that's the thing. Anyways, going back to my grandmother, she was able to go beyond that taboo. Maybe because the 60s changed things a little bit, but I still remember that when I was growing up, when I was a kid, I wouldn't be able to say that my grandmother was a faith healer, that my father was a shaman, because I would be taunted, and I was taunted. I was made fun of and things like that. This is in the 1980s. And I
Mm.
know my grandmother was getting stuff too, but she continued on, she pressed on, and she was quite famous for what she did. Because what she did was in the 70s and 80s. That's the height of her fame. And when my father started apprenticing, they thought he was, learning from my grandmother, but basically he's the one who had to go through that phase of like questioning like his authenticity. But it was my grandmother who really started it, and she shared it with everyone. If my grandmother opened the gates, my father destroyed the gates.
Yeah.
And my brother, me and Jose just walked through it because in
Mm.
our lifetime, things changed because all of a sudden in Mexico, people were interested. And even in the States, people were interested. Like I give thanks to bands like Café Tacuba and Caifanes that began to change things a little bit. And even the movie called The Doors also helped a little bit because they introduced that concept. But it always requires someone to be willing to go beyond their comfort zone and share. I follow
Yeah.
someone on Instagram that she has a shop somewhere in Pennsylvania in the middle of Amish, and the church is always going up to her place of where she sells alternative traditions, Wicca, for example, things like that,
Yeah.
spiritual stuff. And she always shares how they always come in and try to convert her and other things like that. So you always have to be aware of where you're at. So that's why for everyone it's different. She is going the journey of my grandmother in the middle of the social media age. Going
Yeah.
back to the nature of the
It's a
conversation.
brave path. You
It is
need
a brave path,
brave people.
but like my grandmother says, the most important part is knowing the jewel you're going to give. My jewel was to heal, to heal the purpose. That was the mission. If you're just crossing it just to show off the tradition, then it's not going to have any legs because there's no passion behind it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no
Yep.
real reason other than ego and personal importance.
Yeah.
You have to be focal of what the purpose is. And in my grandmother's eyes was healing. And that's what she focused on. She was actually on her way to go into a healing when she had a stroke that ended her life when she was 98. So she technically worked until her very last day. She was
Wow.
on her way to do a healing, and she passed. Well, she had the stroke that basically 2 days later she passed away from.
Mm.
My father does a similar thing. My father says, as a medical doctor, he says, I'm basically on a treadmill. I'm basically taking care of symptoms, but never getting to the root. I want to get to the root of a lot of illnesses. And that was his mission, to help people help themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the purpose of the four agreements, to be able to clean up the channels of communication and undo what conditional love and domestication or conditioning or internalization or indoctrination did to our hearts and minds, and let go of it, to uncorrupt it
Mm.
and heal. And then what my favorite teachings is the same thing, but it's to uncorrupt knowledge. For example, one of my favorite things to teach is the difference between the four agreements and the four conditions.
Ooh.
The
Okay.
conditions is
Let's hear it.
the four conditions are the corruption of the four agreements. We're so used to domestication that we'll corrupt anything with it. The telltale sign that we've corrupted the four agreements is judging ourselves for taking things personal, judging ourselves for making assumptions, judging ourselves for the rest of it, punishing ourselves because we still think as soon as I live up to this image, then I'm worthy of love, or I'm worthy of the name Toltec, or I'm worthy of this. We're domesticating ourselves again. But now we're using the four agreements in that way. In that moment, we turn the four agreements into the four conditions. And
Wow.
not if
Yeah.
we can do this to the four agreements, we're doing that to every single tradition. We're doing that to Christianity, to Judaism, to Muslim, Islam, to India. We're doing that to psychology, psychiatry, Alcoholics Anonymous, music, culture, gender. We're doing that to all of it because we're so used to it. And I can't give what I do not have. My wife, she was raised and born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah. She was raised Mormon. Honey, you are Mrs. Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. Here's the 4 agreements. Read it. Honey, you didn't read the book. You're making an assumption. Honey, you are taking it personally. Honey, I only hang out with people who are impeccable with their own word. At that moment, I'm judging her for agreements she never made, but I'm forcing her to make the agreement through the judgment. We're domesticating. At that moment, I'm not practicing the 4 agreements. I'm practicing the 4 conditions. And if
Do
we
you think
understand,
that, sorry, do you think that fear, which is what we started talking about earlier, but do you think that fear is a driver of that judgment?
oh yeah, irrational fear, definitely it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's domestication, the fear of the judgment, or the fear of not living up to our own expectations. We share that with everyone else because how can I allow it to happen? I need to domesticate everyone too to make them live up to it. Wouldn't it be easier if the 4 agreements is practiced by everyone?
Yeah.
And
The 4
that part right
agreements,
there
like,
drives us to domesticate people.
yeah, I've probably heard this many times, but when I first started my path, the 4 agreements was the first book my teacher gave me to read, and it was life changing. And I talk about that in one of my books, actually, the 4 agreements. And the reason that I really like it, and the reason I really like your new book as well, is because you guys have this really magical way of simplifying things. Because there were so many books that I had read in my life that were esoteric and difficult to put into practice. So for me, I could understand them cognitively, but I was like, but how though? How do you do it? How do you do it? So finding your family and the way that because the Mastery of Self is another book that I read many years ago that was another life-changing moment. You read things and it's just a life-changing moment. Something just sticks. And what I really appreciate is the way that it's distilled down to the point where everybody can understand it. You don't need to be, priest class, if you like, to be able to absorb the teachings, which I really, really appreciate and love. And I think everybody can get to the point where they can read any of the books by your family actually and really get something from it. I do have a question about the Metote Gone Digital, if you don't mind. So AI is a big deal right now, and there's a lot of social media algorithms and things going on online that seem to be designed to trigger the Metote in us, right? The Metote has gone digital. So I wondered what your perspective on that is, and I wonder how your new book can help people address that, because I think it's a big concern for people.
Yeah. Well, I'll address that, answering a little bit of what you're saying. The thing with us and how why we bring it onto earth is that we let life be the teacher. When life is the teacher, the main principal teacher, it means that we're putting into practice everything we've learned. Like imagine reading all the books but never applying it. Then you'll never know what it feels like. It's kind of like reading a recipe book. If you read a recipe book but never apply the recipe, you'll never know what that meal will taste like. The only way to know is you follow each one of those steps, and little by little you get better and better. That's the only way to really find out how that meal will taste like. Well, that's true with every book you've ever read or any workshop you've ever been. You put it into practice. Like for example, for me, when I started teaching, I was a cover band. I was covering the hits, the 4 agreements, the mastery of love, my father's books and my grandmother's teachings. But as life began to happen, I began to adapt it into my own life, into my own experience. And it came from there. Like 7 books have come out. And yes, the beginnings of it is my father's teachings, my grandmother's teachings, but it's also what life has taught me. That's what makes it unique. It sounds different from my father and it sounds different from my grandmother because it's unique to the individual. In the age of AI, we're in a world that has already begun to spread way before that. It's Gutenberg's invention of the press. It was a good prelude to this. When knowledge began to be shared, not just by the elite or the chosen one, the chosen few who were able to receive an education, and knowledge was shared with them, print was able to go to the masses. And just like in then with Gutenberg, a lot of misinformation began to happen. If it's on print, it must be real. And it took several generations to be able to learn how to read a newspaper, to not read it and believe it verbatim. Like you don't swallow it whole. You have to always ask who, what, when, and why. Like who, what, when, and why, and where, and all that. Why you can fill 24 hours of a news channel. The rest of them is straight to the point. Who, what, when, where is straight to the point. Your newscast ends at that point. And newspaper, same thing. Because of print, it's costly. You have to be able who, what, when, where, why. The why, well, that's what filled the opinion columns. That's the why. The opinion columns are the why. And everyone has a different point of view. And it took several generations. Even I'm blessed being part of the International Baccalaureate, and I learned how to read a newspaper there and basically be able to give it scrutiny. You read two or three. The reason why you have two or three newspapers is to see what the pattern is, and the constant is the truth, and the rest of it is just it's just fluff. A nice way of saying it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But but it took us some time to be able to discern. And when we read, what happened with the internet is the same thing or even more powerful than Gutenberg and put in Gutenberg's invention almost to its dying bed, but it still survived. People didn't like reading a book digitally. They still wanted to hold the book. The newspapers was a little something different. They didn't survive as well. The same thing that happened with Gutenberg's invention. We began to believe everything we began to see. And it took us a while to give scrutiny, and, we were depending on them like, no, have fact checkers. And now that's gone, we had fact checkers. Now they were taken away because they was getting away with their propaganda. And it's just one of those things that I say that because, if you read history, you understand that happens time and time again. It's all cyclical.
Yep.
All right, so we have AI. We have a new member to the table, our creation, which is what it is. It's still learning. It's still doing its thing. I was talking to my friend. He lives in New York. He is an art director in design and advertising and arts in New York. He does a multi-talented individual. And his take, where we were talking about it, is what a consensus that him and I both came up to is that AI is a great instrument, but we're going to see a lot of people overuse it and rely on it.
Mm.
And when you rely on it, that's when you no longer think because you're so dependent on what AI tells you to do or says that all of a sudden you don't know your craft and you forget your craft. But if you use it as an instrument, it's just another instrument in your arsenal, but it's you who are the artist. Like, don't let the laziness of something can do it for me, let it think for me. Okay, then it's different. For example, like the Beatles released their latest single using a little bit of AI to clean up John Lennon's voice in the last recording. But here's the thing, it was an instrument in that case. It didn't dictate the song. It basically helped clean John Lennon's voice so that they can build from that the song that came out now and then, which is you can hear Paul McCartney's and Ringo Starr's current contribution, and you can hear the recordings and the memories of George Harrison and John Lennon. And their AI was a part of it, but the band was real because we had two members who are no longer with us, and AI was used to clean up what they did. It didn't add to what they did. It just cleaned it up and they built something. As opposed, in contrast, to an all AI band that's invented that is running around Spotify, and none of its members were real, and the music was all AI generated. There you have the contrast. All right. As the listener, as the audience, is that really important? Well, no, you're gonna hear a song. If the song resonates, it's gonna resonate. You're gonna be bopping along. It's like I still remember the time where a commercial made me and my friend who were like at the time in the 90s, we were so alternative and really goth or grunge or whatever it was back in the day. And like, yeah, we were really and all of a sudden we're both bobbing to a commercial and it totally got us. We're like, by the time they were advertising Las Vegas, I'm like, man, we're like, we dragged in. Same thing. We're going to be hearing a song, a tune, a melody that may be created by AI, and it makes us bop our heads. It makes us resonate as a listener. It's going to be great. But if you put in it has to be authentic, then we have the situation where Bob Dylan was booed for playing electric on a all folk festival. And because Bob Dylan was no longer wanted to be in a pigeonhole, he wanted to create more music because his imagination began to expand and he didn't want to be just folk music. He wanted to explore more. And that same audience booed him again when he did a DJ set and he started playing electronic music,
It's a good
That
point.
happens
It's a good point.
with
Yeah.
artists.
Yeah.
So with AI, it's going to be art for the artist, for the person who creates it. Now, who's going to be afraid? It's the people who the livelihood. And I've read an article or a post by a graphic designer that says, I spent years developing my craft only to be taken away by someone just voicing something into or speaking something into a program or keying in what they want, and the AI will do it for you, and they cut out the middleman. Well, here's the thing: it's just yes, competition will always be there, and this is when it's an argument that even in immigration and politics they talk about they're going to take our jobs, and it's been fueling political stuff all around the world in regards to immigration and things like that.
Yeah.
Now you have an immigrant that we created and has no borders, and it's actually a real threat to someone who makes a living out of this. But the same thing happened with the person who was carrying the horse and buggy, like the carriages. Here comes the car. Those who made a profession of working the landlines of a telephone, and all of a sudden the cell phones come in and makes your job irrelevant. There are so many jobs that became irrelevant because of progress that humanity has created. Just in this 100 years, there's jobs that no longer exist. A film projector guy in a cinema, the guy who projected the movies and the movie that you went to see, is probably doesn't have the same job. That someone else came in because the person who knew how to put reel to reel didn't know how to flip the keys and push the button on a different software that the other person says it was not manual. It's Cinema Paradiso would be a totally different experience.
Yeah.
And if it survived, most of the cinemas no longer exist because the streaming services took it away. Amazon took it away, or whoever it was that took it away. And it's one of those things that's gonna keep happening. Someone is gonna usurp Amazon. Someone's gonna usurp all these things because new technology keeps changing and changing. There's companies that were so powerful in the 60s and the 80s that no longer have that power. This has changed. And this is just the most modern thing. Who knows what AI is going to create? Because, it's Frankenstein's monster, but with a beautiful brain, much, much more intelligent than Einstein,
Yeah, it's like I think there's going to be a real call for human-created art, human-created music, human-created words. I think that people will be surprised about the new layout of our world post-AI. But I am an eternal optimist, I have to say. So although it's going to be very difficult for some areas of society who will have to pivot and will have to change, I do feel that we are quite privileged in the West that we have the option to pivot and we have the option to try other things. And, I would suggest that the fear that we've been talking about can really hold people back from seeing different possibilities or a new way to interact with the world
Yeah.
as it is evolving to be.
Well, that's a beautiful thing. There's expression, necessity is the mother of invention. And that is also in ourselves, because sometimes the biggest fear we have as individuals is going outside our comfort zone. Sometimes when we're so attached, and here's where our fear comes in with attachment. You see, an attachment is something healthy. Attachment is we engage a moment, because that's what life is. We engage a moment and then we disengage when the moment is over. Engage, disengage, engage, disengage, engage, disengage. What makes an attachment unhealthy is when the moment comes to detach, we can't,
Mm,
because we don't know any other way of life. And all of a sudden, fears, this is when fear comes in, irrational fear. Who am I without this attachment? Who am I? How am I going to survive? How am I going to engage? At this moment, you have very little respect for yourself because you don't think you can survive without this. But what happens if you detach? Well, we're able to engage something else.
mm,
Like it's the ability. It's those who have suffered a traumatic brain injury. And I'm not going to call myself traumatic because I can think of people who had worse, but I've had a concussion. In the middle of that, we did find that I have an injury from when I was a teenager that I didn't find out about until
oh,
now. Like, thank God for the concussion, because I wouldn't have known about it. Now that I know about it, I can do something about it. And that's dealing with the plasticity of the brain. The brain can relearn. It may not be as fast as when we were kids, but the brain can relearn. It has the capacity to engage. We just have to get outside the comfort zone and re-engage, re-engage, re-engage. Find that thing that allows us to use things. For example, in this stage of our lives, AI is a tool. It's going to do a lot of harm and it's going to do a lot of good. Both will exist, just like there's both good in social media. There's a lot of good, and right now there's a lot of bad.
mm,
But it's this thing that it's the human brain. The thing about it is, going back to the talk about mitote, is that the reason why is that we're talking mind to mind. We're talking mitote to mitote. That's why when we go to social media or on the internet, it's all talking mind to mind. Going back to the four agreements, taking things personal. All right. One of the things I used to, when I still teach, actually, the best way to start to learn how to not take things personal is start by dealing with the fringe of your circle of friends, of your circle of influence, it's called. If you start in the outer skirts, it's easy because out here, the only thing triggering you is your belief system. Kind of like in social media. If you're in social media and you get triggered, the only thing that's getting triggered is your belief system, your mitote. But as you get closer and you start going into the people, all of a sudden the triggers are not just belief system. These are emotional triggers, emotional wounds with people we have in our lives,
mm,
people that like their interactions were a direct relationship to us. And all of a sudden we get to the toughest people to not take things personal. Usually it's mom, dad, brothers, sisters, the core of our family. And then we've learned, like we put into all into practice little by little. We unlearn, we practice, we get better at not taking things personal. And then you master it. And then life says, oh, really? You think you mastered it? Let me open up this onion and I'll count my kids. And with each year, it changes. You think you don't have to take a 5-year-old personally. Let me introduce you to the 6-year-old. Let me introduce you to the 10-year-old. Let me introduce you to the 15 to 20-year-old. And that's where I'm at. My kids are 20 and 18. That's where I'm at. And then the person you're taking the most personal is changing in front of you. And then it turns out, if you really go in, if you really want not taking things personal to work, it starts by not taking yourself personally. Once you're able to not take yourself personally, everything else is easier. And it turns out it's about engaging this. Know yourself, know thyself. Start here. I can't be the change you want to see in the world. Let peace begin with me. If you want to see the end of the war, it ends with me. If I want to heal fear, it has to start with me. I can't heal the fear out there, but I can feel and heal the fear within me. That's the nature of my book. It was my journey to heal the fear within me, or at least come to terms with it. to acknowledge it, to acknowledge my I have PTSD. I have caregiver's fatigue. I do have a brain injury. I do have traumas from the past. Been blessed to be able to heal a lot of my wounds with my ex-girlfriends. And they've given me that chance. And I'm so grateful to my wife for giving me the opportunity to do that. And the best person that benefits is her and she and I, because also those past wounds are no longer infecting and impacting my relationship today.
Mm.
And there it is. That's the work.
And I think that's a really important thing to let people know as well, don't you think? About these like realistic conversations about a healing timeline. You know, how long things take. And for me, I'm on lifetime. You know, I'm on like from birth to death, and I'm happy with that. And these moments where we find a book like The Poisoned Arrow can really help move us forward and help that, like you said, the onion layer, you know, how we can continue to become who we are destined to be. But it's a lifetime's work, right? It doesn't happen overnight. And I think sometimes people get a bit upset when they don't see the instant.
Oh yeah, they want it instantly. But that's the big lesson in my life. And I learned it the hard way. No one heals on my schedule. Not even me. It's like it's life happens and you have to adapt or you want to adapt. That's the thing. There's a lot of things that's gonna be AI is gonna bring, going back to your point about with teachers out there. Yes, AI is gonna come in. How are you gonna use it? This book, the Poison Arrow, AI helped me in transcribing me because I couldn't talk fast enough. So what I did, I recorded my voice onto something, and an AI transcriber, which is it was much better than whatever Fire Dragon or
Fireflies
something
or
like 10 years ago. I tried using it. It was especially if you have an accent, terrible, absolutely
so
terrible.
bad.
It was
so bad.
like it was faster to me to transcribe it myself than fix what it says.
Yeah.
But you know, you use a software that helped me transcribe it, and then the humans, which is the editors, the humans and we began to work. So it was an instrument. So it's one of those things that we adapt. And if you happen to be in a career that AI is going to take it, all right, find a way around. Actually, a beautiful analogy to that is a movie out there. I'm trying. Like, it was someone who worked in NASA, and she realized that their jobs was going to get taken by computers. So
What's it called? It was such a good movie. Yes.
She taught all the people who were working as computers or like calculating how to program the software from those first generation. And all these people who would have been out of the job get the job because they were already trained. What's the name of that? Hidden Figures, right?
Hidden Figures, yes. Oh, that was such a good movie. That was so good.
Very good movie.
Yes.
But that scene, that moment, you know, where she sees that the computers are gonna come and take the jobs, and she sees a whole pool of other women who are gonna lose their jobs to this thing, and thought, well, what's the need? What's gonna be the need to this? And learn it. And that's the thing about life. It never stops. Like if you thought that your school days are over, think again. It's like as we adapt, learning allows us to go into the world and understand it. Like basically right now, like even I'm guilty of this. There are certain software that I don't know how to use and my kids do. And all I needed to do is pick up a book and read what it was, and then I would be fluent in it. And the only reason why I'm not fluent in it is because I didn't pick up the book to understand the new software. And all I had to do was take an effort. And that reminds me of a teaching a teacher taught me in Mount Shasta. I really wish I could remember her name. But she said that the key to enlightenment is effort. That's it. The key to enlightenment is effort. Since then, life has taught me this. Effort is using the energy that animates this body and mind to manifest something. It's taking one step. It's making a choice. That's what effort is. Discipline is to remember to apply that effort every day. Forget about the drill sergeant. It's about making that choice. Success is simply following through. like that recipe book. You follow each one of those steps, your success will be you have a meal that you will eat at the end of it. And that's really the key. The key to enlightenment is effort. The key to surviving AI is the effort to keep yourself, I would say, relevant, but more importantly, it allows you to continue to be the artist of your own life.
Mm.
What is that going to look like? I wish I could tell you, but it's going to be unique to you.
Love it. I love it. So I had an idea, Miguel, if you would indulge me. So I thought what we could do is I thought I could ask you some quick fire questions that maybe you could answer in like a few sentences about things
Sounds
that.
good.
Yeah, okay. So the first one is what is the heart of the poisoned arrow and what makes it different from your other books?
I actually use it to heal myself in real time. And and that's me sharing it. You know, but
Now
the
for
mastery of self, it was also that's the same way. I used it to heal myself, but really after I published it, that's what I used it to stop drinking. So it's been 9 years since I stopped drinking, and it coincided after reading with my book release. I applied it. So
hey, I'm
I read
also
the
sober.
manuscript, I read my own book, and I'm like, okay, let me apply it.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, that's a really good. That I think helps people to humanize you too, right? And not have you
No,
on a pedestal that you can fall off. I don't like being on a pedestal. I don't like people put me on one because it's really annoying when you fall off.
oh, I love dismantling and destroying Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. Time and time again. Like in every class in every lecture, the very first thing that goes out the window is Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. That guy doesn't exist. I exist.
Yeah. Okay, next one. So for someone who's listening right now who feels afraid, who feels fear, what's one thing they can do in the next minute that will help them?
Take a breath. Look at something around you and realize it's called grounding. Just breathe and ask yourself, is this a real threat that I have? Or is it me thinking about life? Is it my projection? But you know what? Actually, that's just me. That's the mind. When you're in the middle of a fear, if you're in the middle of a panic attack, if you're in the middle of an anxiety attack, logic is not going to help you. You know, one will love it if it was, but the emotional, once the emotional body starts going, so all you have to do is focus your attention on your breath. Focus your attention on your breath. Focus your attention on something around you. Kind of like in hypnotherapy, you focus your pain in a focal point and you project your pain to that focal point. What you're doing is basically redirecting your attention from your thoughts, is redirecting yourself from those moments. My father's favorite instrument to do that is music. Once he catches himself, he redirects himself to music. Something that allows you to be present, something that allows you to get out of your mind. So, breath. I am alive at this moment in time. And for as long as I'm alive, anything is possible, including healing from the wounds of conditional love left in my heart and my mind. I am alive. So focus on that breathing. Focus on how your body feels. Focus on something around you. Focus on a different sound. Focus on the rhythm of a train or the sounds of a muffler or of a car going past. Think of the sound of a bird. Think about no, think about it. Listen to it. Listen to something real
Mm.
and focus your breath towards that direction.
All right.
Because in that moment,
Yeah.
I would love to say that a personal transformation would be easy if we were all robots. All we would need is logic, but we're not, we're human beings and we experience emotions. So something logical is not going to go. So address the body and give your body love.
All right. how has your understanding of fear evolved over the years? Like, what do you see now that you didn't see before?
Well, like I said before, it's there to help me. It's there to help protect me, and it's okay to feel it. Whatever judgment I had about feeling fear, it was just someone's projection, like forcing me to do something I didn't want to do. Basically, I was thought fear was that way, but it's natural to feel fear. What's unnatural is to abuse it. It's like alcohol only is terrible once you start abusing it, or any other drug, or any other emotion that is not conducive to your own happiness. It's just a thing. So fear, sorry, I unlocked the thing and it totally
It's fine.
I was looking for the name of the movie. But it's basically it's that it's there to help me, and it's okay to feel it and to be aware of the difference between irrational fear and real fear. And fear is a beautiful thing, but could be destructive. And the most dangerous reaction is freeze. I used to think it was fight, but it's freeze. That's the most dangerous. And the reason why is because when you allow irrational fear to freeze you, it's because you
Mhm.
no longer trust yourself to make a yes and no choice or decision. You no longer trust yourself to make choices. You no longer trust yourself, and that's the one when it's dangerous because all of a sudden you're stuck because you're afraid to go in a different direction or that direction or this direction because you no longer trust yourself to make a choice. And that's irrational fear telling you all of what it.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, what is the most beautiful thing you've witnessed in someone who's worked with these teachings about fear?
Actually happened quite recently. At the very beginning of a workshop, there was a person who wasn't hugging anyone or anything like that. And by the end of it, he was not hugging, but he was shaking people's hands and smiling a bit more. But he even played piano for us.
Mm.
That was beautiful. So it was
Mm.
pretty cool to see that. Whether it was fear or not, I don't know. It was nice to witness someone open up.
Yeah, that just a wee crack.
Hmm.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Now, is there anything else that you would like to share that we haven't covered?
My whole thoughts just did a bum rush. They all came forward and they all stopped. I'm like, wait a minute. Is there, for me, is all this work is to enjoy life, to enjoy being yourself, to enjoy life. And sometimes fear stops you from making choices that you want to take and make. And sometimes with good prudence, it's prudent of you to not make that choice. It was the right decision. But there's some decisions that you didn't even give life the chance to say yes because you already said no. When you tell yourself no because you're afraid of the answer, that's when we clip our wings. Because everyone has the right to say no. But when we say it to ourselves, that's what stops us. It's okay for someone to say no. And if we're afraid of the no, because normally, for example, it's like when I was young, I was afraid to ask a girl out and go out, like the fear of rejection is quite strong. But as I gotten older, I realized all this person is saying is their truth, their honest truth. I'm not their type. They're not into me. They're not attracted to me. It's not the appropriate time, whatever. It's nothing against me. It's their truth. Like, for example, I don't like papaya. I hate papaya. Ever since I was a kid, I hate it. It just, the taste, the flavor makes me gag every time. It's just terrible. But every year I eat it just in case this is the year I become an adult. Turns out I haven't, apparently. But anyways, that was someone used against me. All right. In their eyes, I'm papaya. I'm not their type, and that's okay. Kind of like in Sex in the City, like Berger told Miranda, he's just not that into you. She's not that into me. Now, why am I afraid of rejection? It become my favorite, one of my favorite stories to tell what taking things personally is. To take it personal is to use that person's truth and reinforce whatever insecurity I have about myself. At that moment, I'm taking this person's truth and using it against me. I'm using it to continue my domestication. If I respected the person, which now I do, I simply say, thank you so much. I understand I'm papaya to you, and that's fine. I'll find someone who loves papaya. And luckily for me, my wife likes papaya, meaning she likes me. And for 21 years, we've been together. That's the thing. It's like, be with someone who wants to be with you. Don't waste your time with someone who doesn't. Be with someone who does. And don't take it personal when someone says no, because all that person is saying is they're saying their truth. They're not that into you, and that's fine. What's damaging is using their truth to say that you're worse than or inferior or subjugate. And that's usually when we tell ourselves no. That's why we're afraid of that no so much, because if they say no to us, I'm not lovable, I'm ugly, I'm this, I'm that, and whatever mitote or diatribe happens in our mind that we ruminate over, that's what we're really afraid of. We're really afraid of the pain that's gonna come from the judgment that's gonna come when someone says no to me.
Mm.
And sometimes if you understand this one, you can understand why people get angry and just like, when they hear no. Like, because how dare you say no to me? Like, and then there's this quest to make the person change their no to a yes. That's ego based.
Yeah. Okay.
But there's also the time as I think about it, there's the stories of like someone how to court someone, and little by little that no turns into a yes. That's the old classic courting someone,
Mm-hmm.
and that's basically looking back on it. Is because every time that person said no, you respected it. Every time that person said no, you respected it. But you never knew if today was going to be the day that changed. But you have to always respect it, and even walk away and letting go, letting go. Respect goes a long way.
Respect will take us far. That's a thing, isn't it? There seems to be like a fundamental lack of respect at the moment in the way that different sides are engaging or not with each other, the way that we engage with people. And that's one thing about social media. It seems to remove some of the need to be somewhat respectful, which is interesting, right?
Well, that's because your nose is not in any danger of getting broken.
Nailed it.
Any person is brave. It's kind of like you see those dogs that bark at each other, and the gates between them, they bark, they bark, bark. They open the gate and they stop barking. That's what social media is.
Yeah, that's very funny. All right, this has been a real delight. Thank you so much, Miguel, for joining me and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you, Rhonda. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your program. It's been fun. Thank you so much for making it so fun.
Good. I'm glad it was fun. It was fun, wasn't it? It was nice. All right. Miguel's book is The Poisoned Arrow, A Toltec Guide to Overcoming Fear. Is available everywhere you buy your books. So get out there and conquer your fear. Right, guys. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you again soon. Ciao, ciao.
Cheers.